abrupt intro ending. Welcome in. It is the Johncast podcast. Thank you for tuning into this podcast. I'm thinking maybe a new intro soon. I don't know. I'm not sure. Let me know what you think. You can tweet at John Audius Radio. You can send me a message at my website, johncastpodcast.com. Should I change the intro? It's just kind of music because it's more of a video thing. But let me know if you think I should be changing it. By the way, this is the last episode for you to qualify to win college football tickets on November 5th in Madison and a $50 gift card to me and Julio. What do you got to do? Great question. So my buddy Justin from college gave me his tickets to the game, and Justin came up with 3 trivia questions. This is the last of 3 trivia questions. You can find the second one in my last episode, and the episode before that is the first one. All you got to do is comment with the answer on social media. So whether that's on Twitter or you see the post for the episode on Facebook or Instagram, just comment in there. And if you get all 3 correct, all 3 trivia questions correct, you will then qualify for those 4 tickets and the $50 gift card. So this is the final question. As a head coach, okay, how many conference championship teams has Kelly Sheffield at Wisconsin coached for volleyball? As a head coach, how many conference championship teams has Kelly Sheffield coached? Not just at Wisconsin, but just as a head coach in his career, okay? How many championship teams? Answer that with a comment on social media. And if you get all 3 questions over the last 3 episodes correct, you will qualify for the drawing for the 4 college football tickets and the $50 gift card. Okay, now that we've got that completed, I'd like to remind you that me and Julio is a fine sponsor of this program. They've got game day football specials for college football and pro football with $3 Coors Light pints, $5 classic margaritas, and of course, great food specials. And hey, if you're wondering, where can we go on a Sunday that's open to go eat and perhaps for breakfast? How about me and Julio? They're open 7 days a week, and their Sunday breakfast is from 9 to 1, and it's outstanding. So check out me and Julio. That's just off Fish Hatchery Road in Madison. Ian's Pizza is also a fine sponsor of this podcast, and all 3 of their Madison locations will be dishing out free slices. Did you hear me? Free slices of mac and cheese pizza on Election Day, November 8th from 5 to 10 p.m. 5 to 10 p.m. on Election Day. They'll be closed until 5 that day to ensure that their staff has plenty of time to go out and vote as well. But you go vote first and get your pizza later. All right. Free slice of mac and cheese, all 3 Madison locations of Ian's Pizza after 5 p.m. on November 8th from 5 to 10 p.m. All right. There you go. Well, today's guest is a staple on the Big Ten Network. Has been with the network, I believe, since its very have you been with the network since the very beginning? I think you have. My guest is Mike Hall of the Big Ten Network. Mike, thank you so much for joining the podcast. This is awesome. Nice to meet you.
I'm glad to meet you too. Appreciate the invite.
All right. So you started at BTN. You were there since day one.
That's right. Yeah. I signed on in like June or July of 2007, and we went on the air, I think August 30th of 2007.
Man. So the thing I remember most about BTN and when it first launched, right, was the Michigan Appalachian State game, right? Wasn't that like the first broadcast of a football game?
It was our first ever broadcast. Michigan was ranked in the top 5. They were national champion preseason favorites, and nobody'd really heard of Appalachian State unless you lived in North Carolina. Yeah. And we had this A-team broadcast crew ready to go. Tom Brunneman and Charles Davis and Carissa Thompson on sidelines. And sure enough, the upset happened, and we went from the network that people were saying nobody's ever going to watch because none of the games are any good to it was the story of the week nationally in the sport.
That's I was just going to say, okay, so there was some criticism at the time, right, of BTN like that, like you just mentioned. But I was going to ask, like, that amazing game and finish had to help at some level in the network just kind of propel itself over expectations.
Massively. It was a huge, thunderbolt of energy for what we were trying to get done. Again, that was sort of the narrative was people were saying, well, why would you watch that network? Why do we need to put it on our cable system? There's nothing important. It's 3rd tier games. And the truth is, I do think we would have at some point, been fine anyways, but it was such a jolt to us because at the end of the day, the whole reason the network was a success is because people don't remember this, but 16 years ago, your football team in college would have been on TV 2, 3, 4 times a year, maybe. And we were offering you the ability to watch every single game, no matter what. And that just wasn't a thing. So I always thought it would work because if you're a Wisconsin fan and you have the option of watching 12 of your team's games or 2, 3, or 4, well, you'd rather watch those 12. Now, maybe you don't care about seeing every Minnesota game. Maybe Michigan Appalachian State doesn't matter to you. But when you can focus on your teams, that's what matters. So I think the network would have been fine one way or another, but it just immediately killed the narrative that the network is only going to have unimportant games and nothing special will happen there. And that just, it was a big wave of energy we rode into the second week and into the second year even of our network.
Yeah, I think no matter what, Big Ten Network was going to be a success because there were so many fans involved with their teams and there were so many games that people were going to come there. You were going to get viewers. But I think it's also kind of interesting that what helped propel or kind of jumpstart that whole thing was a loss by a conference team. You know what I mean? Like the loss helped the whole Big Ten conference or the Big Ten network in a way. It was just it's kind of strange that way.
No, I totally agree and that was a weird thing at the day it happened. There was an immediate thought of like, oh boy, this is not good for the network because one of the signature teams about to have a signature year or so, we thought, is now kind of not the laughing stock, but like they were being ripped on and made fun of. And like some of the smarter bigwigs at the time were maybe not necessarily bragging about this, but in their head were going, yeah, this is going to work out okay for us. This is, you'd rather have the Big Ten teams win, but if you're going to have a loss, it might as well be on our air if it's going to make national news.
Yeah. So we've never really met before or spoke. I'm not sure. Have we met before? We might have met in passing, or I know I probably called you to try to get you on the radio show in Madison a couple of times when I had.
Yeah, we've known of each other. You stalked me on my window for a couple of years. We got past it. Everything's fine now.
So what is new? So how do you fill your time between Big Ten Network and what do you like to do on the side? Like, is it just all sports?
Well, I've become a father of 3 now, so that's at this point, kind of whenever I'm not working, that's what I'm doing is dealing with the kids, a 6, 3, and a 1-year-old. When I was younger, living in Chicago, I would do improv comedy. That was my thing I did away from work. But once I got married and started having kids, the amount of free time you had sort of very quickly goes away, and you're coaching baseball, you're putting on shoes, which might take 2 to 3 hours depending on the day. And that's just me, let alone the 3-year-old. But yeah, that's kind of my life right now is work and dad. That's mostly it.
Yeah, that would be okay. So I was going to ask, like, do you watch like TV shows or play video games or something like that? But I don't know how much time with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, you must just be constantly up and just tying, like you said, tying shoes or playing or doing something.
Yeah, I do still have, there's sometimes, it's funny. There's a nerdy thing I can tell you about. You ever heard of the board game Catan, Settlers of Catan?
I have. The men's basketball team at one point during their big runs, I think they liked playing, or at least members of the team, certain members like playing that game. Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's a fun one. A couple of my good buddies about 8 or 9 years ago got me into it. And then when COVID hit, that first like couple months, nobody knew what was going on. And my one buddy got super nerdy into it. He found like this dark web version of it where you could play Catan with literally people all over the world. And so we got kind of those first couple months when it was like, what are we doing in life? That was like, oh, this is a thing I'd look forward to. When the kids went to bed, my wife went to bed, I would stay up for like 2 or 3 hours and would just play that. And it would, run my brain and give it some activity. But was harder to play with human people in person for sure for a while. Although I had a fun game the other day over at my house. So we did some of that.
So let me, I brought it up if you're watching on Spotify, and this will be on YouTube at some point as well. I just Googled it. So is this what we're talking about? Is it the actual board game, or is there an online version too?
There is an online version too, but yeah, I had some buddies over the other day, and we played some industry pals actually, and we played a version of the old school Catan, like an actual board game. It's basically like a Risk meets a Monopoly type of thing where you're trying to build an empire. It sounds very nerdy. The more I talk about it, the nerdier it gets. But it was something that happened just the other day, and it was fun.
That's awesome. No, I've never, board games. We like a good board game at the house. And I really think like just having people over and having a board game, it seems like kind of an old school thing to do. And maybe nowadays that's an old person thing to do, but damn it, that's fun. Having a board game night, even if it's with the family or if you're having friends over, board games they're really fun.
And there's two different ways to do it. One is the very intense way. Like if you and your buddies are like, no, I'm going to try to crush you and you're going to try to crush me. And we're going to try to get 2, 3, 4 versions because if I lose 1 or 2, I want a still chance to get back at you. And the other kind is the one we did the other day where it was like, I don't know, we got snacks out. The baseball playoffs are on. You take a minute, you watch that. You go in a 5-minute rant about something. You joke around. Whose turn is it? Oh, it's mine. Okay. So there's 2 very different ways to have a board game night.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I love board games. I love doing the board games. Are you big into like any video game stuff? Like
I was super into old school video games, like when I was growing up, Nintendo or Super Nintendo and stuff like that. But I have a very small brain, John. So when it got past A and B button, I was like, wait, there's an X, there's a Y1, there's a Z2. I don't know. So I've had a hard time adapting to the newer video games.
You and I are perfectly aligned there because I do a video game podcast with former Packer Amon Green. And one of the things I always say, or I think it's in our intro is, I'm used to jump and run. And now it's like, by the way, I love Rocket League. So that's kind of the game I've kind of, grown to or whatever, gone to. And there are more buttons there and it's very complicated, but I know exactly what you mean is there's so many buttons, so many things are happening. You're like, I was just trying to hit the question block before.
Right. I'm trying to shoot a fireball. That's all I need to do.
That's all I was trying to do. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about your career because your journey to Big Ten Network. Do you have like a 60-second recap of the dream job experience when people ask you, like, do you know how to, because I'm sure you get asked about dream job on ESPN like all the time.
Yeah, I still do get asked about it. It is funny now that amazingly, that was 18 years ago. So
Wow.
A couple of years back, it got to the point where people, someone like 30 or older would know about it, but under 30 would be like, what was that? And you're like, oh yeah, well, of course, because you were, 9 at the time and you weren't staying up at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night to watch ESPN. But yeah, the 60-second version is back in 2004, ESPN did their version of American Idol. They did a reality show, game show type thing. And the prize at the end of the Yellow Brick Road was a 1-year contract to be a SportsCenter host. And I entered it as a senior in college and ended up making it on the show and ended up winning. And so the show ended in like late March of 2004. And I had this meeting with all the executives at ESPN the day afterwards. And like, when can you start? And I was like, I've got like 6 weeks of college left. And they're like, go graduate. So June 1st, 2 weeks after graduation, I moved up to Bristol and started working on ESPN News and SportsCenter. And that was my beginning of my sportscasting career.
It's I remember that, I guess 18 years ago, it doesn't feel like that sometimes, but I remember watching that. I thought that was a great show. It was really for sports fans. Everything just kind of worked for that show at that time. Do you have any idea what you were going to do had you not won that? And obviously your career went that way with getting a job at ESPN, boom, just like that. If you don't win that, what do you think Mike Hall's doing?
Well, I was a broadcast journalism student at the University of Missouri, which is one of the best places to be a broadcast journalism student. So path A would have been to do what most people do, which is to try to get a job in, as good a market as you can get, whether that's market 95 in Topeka, Kansas, or market 140 in, wherever, Alabama or something like that. And try to do good on air and then get a job in a better market and then hope that job leads you to ESPN. That was kind of the plan. It was also possible that maybe I would have said, I don't know, let me just stick the degree in my back pocket and move to Chicago and pursue comedy and acting. And I don't really know, to be honest with you, what would have happened one way or another. But I was kind of, if dream job either didn't happen or if I was on the show but didn't win it, I was kind of going to graduate and see where the chip sort of fell and find the best way forward at that time.
So was that going to be then, when you were going to graduate with that degree, were you thinking, I want to be like a TV reporter, like sitting down with the news, like an anchor like you are now? Was that the job? Was it play-by-play? Was it sports talk show host, or what was it?
It was more the Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, Stuart Scott, Carl Ravitch type of thing. I wanted to be a Sports Center guy. I wanted to be Bob Costas sitting behind a desk. I did play-by-play in high school. I did it in college. I do it now, actually, too, for basketball. But that wasn't why I got into it. I got into it because, I just finished reading the Dick Ebersol book, and it was just it was a great book, but it was also a flood of memories about, sports and specifically NBC sports at that time. And yeah, I loved the NBA in the 90s, mostly because of Michael Jordan. But I also very nerd, I liked watching Bob Costas. And I was like, if he's on, it feels bigger and more important. And it was easier for me to relate to him than it was to relate to Scottie Pippen. So that was kind of what jazzed me up. And that's what I always wanted to do. That's the reason I went to school and tried to get into the industry, was to do what Dan and Keith or what Bob Costas was doing.
Wow. And then you get, accelerated with that ESPN position. That must have been like, what was that like, winning that? And then knowing that, oh my gosh, they're paying me real money to do what I've wanted to do. And I get to start at the top.
Yeah, it was a video game thing. You jump from level 2 to level 6 because you went down the right pipe. It was very lucky. I mean, I still to this day know how fortunate I was for the timing of that, for me to be in the right place at the right time. It was wild. It was, I can't think of many examples where somebody's like, gee, in 10 years, my goal, if everything breaks right, is to start at the place, or is to end up at the place where I'm actually going to start my career. So I was never not grateful for it. It was a whirlwind at the time, because I was learning. Remember, when you're 22 and you're out of college, you're learning how to pay the gas bill on your own. You're learning how to eat food on your own. You're learning how to be an adult in a workplace on your own. But I was also learning how to do the job, because everything I learned in college was about all the behind the scenes stuff. I learned how to hold a camera and how to edit film and how to write a script. But I didn't get a lot of experience actually on air anchoring. So I really learned on the job in Bristol, Connecticut, which again was wonderful, because I know everyone learns in a different way and there's different types of people, but I firmly believe strongly in the you rise to the level of your competition, right? If you're surrounded by people who are great, it will force you to be great too. And I was surrounded by the best in the business, in the industry. Mm-hmm. So that was a very fortunate thing that, a lot of kids, when you're 22 and you're starting in broadcast journalism, you're getting 2 minutes on the weekend at the end of the 10 o'clock news, if you're lucky and the weather didn't run long, cutting you to 90 seconds. And I was doing 2-hour shows every night and 3-hour shows on a college football Saturday. And, the worst case scenario was when I would do an hour-long Sports Center, because that was only an hour to do the rest. Whereas ESPN News, you'd get longer shifts. So it was a fascinating experience, because you were learning how to be an adult and also learning how to do the job that you've always wanted to do.
Yeah. Now you'd say you're fortunate, which you are, but I mean, obviously there's talent there, or you don't win, there is, obviously you're very talented at what you do. And I'm curious, with that position of being that studio host, how much, because you mentioned you liked improv, you liked acting. How much do you think that type of skill set benefited you in this role as well? Because I know you had to be very creative and be able to almost improvise on the fly sometimes. So how much do you think those two things impacted that and who you are now as a studio host?
A lot. I think, performing is performing, whether you're acting or you're broadcasting. Like at the end of the day, journalism, broadcast journalism is a communication industry. You have to be able to communicate the message you're trying to get across to the viewers. And part of that is performance. It shouldn't be 90% of it, right? Then you're not really doing any journalism. You're just, a performance art person. But you have to be able to get your message across in a way that someone at home can, take it in. So that was a large part. I always tell people improv was almost, if not sometimes more valuable to what I do than a journalism degree, because when you're doing improv, you're reacting to what someone said, which forces you to be a good listener. So when you're doing an interview, you have to be a good listener. If you're just rattling off your questions and you're not listening to the answers, you're never going to be very good at your job. And, pardon me. And improv forces you to do that. It forces you to be creative. It it makes you deal with things you weren't planning. Yeah. So, you can plan, I'm going to go in as a doctor who's saving the day, and you start a scene, and then your buddy comes in and says, help me fix this pipe, Mac. And you're like, oh, right, we're plumbers. like you have to adjust. And the same thing with a show. You could have a highlight and you're reading it and all of a sudden they run the wrong highlight. Or, you're asking someone a question and they all of a sudden say, well, that's why I am going to quit the team today. And, you weren't planning on that. So it really does. There's so many skills. One of my friends, Nicole Auerbach, who's a person with us on the Big Ten Network, and she's a writer and yada, yada. She ended up taking classes it was either IO or Second City a year or two ago. And I was telling her, I was like, you should do it because it's fun. And you'll meet great people. And it's a thing to do in Chicago. But also, you're going to be better at TV if you do that, because it will keep you sharp. It will keep you creative. It will keep your mind thinking in a way that will help you when you're on air.
That's really interesting. So what would you say is, in improv, what is the number one rule? Because you talk about listening, like what is that number one rule to, I don't know, like when you first get into improv and you're trying to figure out what the heck's going on, what's the tip you would give somebody?
Well, the Chicago style improv is more like a longer form improv, but the basic gist of it is called yes and, right? It basically means if you and I are in a scene and you say something, I have to agree with it by saying yes, and then I add something to it by saying and. So if you start off a scene and you say, again, Mac, help me bust this pipe, I can't say no to it and go, my name's not Mac, it's Brian, and I'm a doctor.
Okay.
Like then there's no scene there. But if you say, yeah, man, of course I'll help you with that pipe. We got to fix this soon or this basement's going to be flooded, right? You have to agree to it and then add on to it. And then your partner's job is to agree to it. I know it's going to be flooded and geez, my daughter's 5th birthday party is in an hour and a half. We better get going. And then all of a sudden you're building a world together that nobody planned. Either of you planned beforehand.
Yeah.
But if you accept it and then you try to add on to it, that's how you build a scene. And that's really helpful it's mostly helpful for improv, but the concepts of it, the tenets of it work in life. It certainly works in sports broadcasting. It works in creative anything. If you're in a meeting with someone and your instinct is just to say, no, I don't like it or that won't work, you're not going to get much done. But if someone throws out an idea and you go, yeah, I think we could do that. And what if we did this on top of it? Yeah. It's a more healthy way to move things forward.
And then how's your brain work when you're doing the improv and you do that yes and? Is it the first, do you just go with your instinct in the very first thing, or do you spend a split second saying, well, if I said this, or do you not even have time to think if I said this?
You should go with your instinct, the first thing. If you take a couple seconds, unless your character that you've created is someone who's slower or who takes time to think of something. Yeah. But for the most part, it's better to do this person set something up. Okay, what's my initial response? What's the first thing I think of? I say it, and then he or she reacts to it, and then you react, and blah, 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 blah. So it's more, because the idea behind that is then no matter what, every scene you're doing is something that's never existed before. So that's sort of the idea, is every time you see an improv show, it couldn't have been written before because there was no way to plan it before, because you weren't coming out with an agenda and your partner wasn't coming out with an agenda, but the two of you combined create a world and a scene that in theory has never existed and never will again.
Yeah. Do you watch The Office?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you remember the scene? This is, I don't know why I've thought of this, but you're just talking about going with yes and. Do you remember the scene when Michael Scott, he was there and he just kept pulling out his gun? You know what I mean? Like he was just always wants to be the cop, and just, I don't know. It made me think of that because he never did the yes and. He was taking control of the situation all the time and just always putting it as he's like an action hero.
And part of why that works is Steve Carell is one of the all-time greats from Second City and from the improv world. So they would make a lot of improv jokes because a lot of their writers were improvisers as well. And so they could use that concept of Michael Scott is supposed to be like the worst boss, right? Well, he's also the worst of a lot of things, the worst boyfriend, the worst improviser. And so Carell knows all the things you should not do in a scene to make a successful scene. And that allowed him and those writers to perfectly say, well, if the worst person in the world at improv is there, he would do this, this, and this.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I bet you that helped, because I die when I see that scene, because I just think it's the concept of him just, his character just wanting to always do that, and to know now that obviously he was part of that improv in Chicago, and that he knows exactly how to make that character work is really, really funny. When are you coming to Madison? You're going to be in Madison soon, right?
Soon. The first weekend of November, we are doing our football pregame show, our Saturday morning show called Big Ten Tailgate. I don't know the exact location, but somewhere just outside of Camp Randall. We'll be set up. We'll do it from 9 to 11 a.m. right before, I think kickoff is either, I think it's an 11 o'clock kick. It might be 2:30, but I don't think they've decided yet. But we'll do our pregame show, and I will come in the Friday, the day before, and we'll shoot some features around campus, maybe meet with the head coach or a player. I'll go to a place and try a burger in town. Yeah, it'll be fun. Madison's, this isn't news to anybody. Madison is most people's favorite or top 2 or 3 campuses in the Big Ten to visit, and it's obvious why.
Yeah. Is that the November 5th game?
Correct.
Yeah, that's okay. That's the one I'm giving tickets away to. Okay. So I did see you talked about Best Burger. So I saw on the Twitter, let me pull up my Twitter, and I retweeted your tweets from, I believe, like a few days ago. But you said you're coming to campus.
Yep.
And you need the best burger spot in town, asking where it is and why. So if you want to get on Twitter at Mike Hall here and let him know, Badger fans, where they should be having their burger, because I see a lot of people put Dottie's, which, I mean, that's the number one thing that everybody in this city will tell you is Dottie's. But then I see some people at the end here trying to talk about, where is it? Blue Moon. Now, I have never eaten a burger at the Blue Moon, but there's another suggestion. It's a little place just off University Avenue.
Yeah, that's been the fun thing with doing this is, like, I found most places you'll get 70 to 80% agree the best burger is here. Mm-hmm. But there's always like 2 or 3 others that are like, yeah, but this is a little more, this might be better, but less popular, or this is a better atmosphere, but worse food, or better food, but worse atmosphere, yada, yada. Which is kind of the fun thing, right? Because your college campus, those things, they're attached to so much, right? Because it reminds you of being 19. It reminds you of being with your friends. All those stuff rushes in. That sometimes maybe even the food in theory isn't even that good. You remember it, and it tastes better because of everything that comes with it.
Well, here, let me give you some suggestions. So I wrote down my top places. So besides Dottie's, which I think is probably a spot you guys are going to have to go, I will submit to you the Village Green in Middleton. So it's just outside of Madison. It's not too far from downtown. Village Green, it's this little, some would describe it as a dive. Used to be, I believe, a bowling alley that got remodeled into what it is now. But they're just the plain old cheeseburger. When I first tried that, and I was part of a food tour in Middleton, I was just a night out with the family or whatnot. I tried that. I was like, oh my God, I found the burger that I'm going to be eating for the rest of my life, as long as I'm in the Madison area, and it's at the Village Green.
Great. I love it.
Write that down. Also, Great Dane, you might want to check out, obviously. You can stop at Me and Julio. They have a great selection of food. You could stop at Ian's Pizza. They might have a slice with some sort of burger thing. And then, of course, I saw a lot of people say this too. Have you ever been to a Culver's?
Yes. I love Culver's. And give me those fries any day, man.
That's crinkle cut. You're the best. Okay, so there's some suggestions. So when you come to Madison, you can go check that out. I'll be watching that. I want to know which spot you pick. Okay.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. It comes down to sometimes. I mean, the lame answer is sometimes it comes to logistics. If some place says you can shoot in here, or some place says you can't, you go to option 2 or 3 or what have you. So I'm sure when it gets closer to, we'll figure out the place.
Man, what a fun job! You get to travel around the Big Ten cities and go eat food and be silly.
Yeah, not bad. There are worse gigs.
I like it. So people can see you on that. They can also obviously catch you on Big Ten Network, and you're doing play-by-play as well. So I might see you around.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be doing men's and women's basketball play-by-play all winter. I think my first game's coming up November 8th. Going all the way till March.
Okay. Well, if you happen to have a Wisconsin women's basketball game on that schedule, perhaps we'll see each other if you're not doing it remote or whatnot. Mr. Mike Hall, thank you so much. I don't know why I called you Mr. Mike Hall, but thank you so much.
It's appropriate. You give me respect.
Okay. Sorry, sir. Mr. Mike Hall joins us here today from Big Ten Network. Go have fun with the 1-year-old, 3-year-old, and 6-year-old, because I'm sure they're going to keep you busy pretty soon here when they get there.
Thanks for having me on, man. That was fun.
All right, cool. Thank you. There you go. That is Mike Hall, Mr. Mike Hall from the Big Ten Network. So thank you to Mike for joining me on this podcast. A reminder to everybody, Me and Julio is the spot to go if you want to go check out college football Saturdays or pro football Sundays. They've got $3 Coors Light pints, $5 classic margaritas during those days, and also open 7 days a week. Also brought to you by our good friends at Ian's Pizza, 3 locations in Madison, and they're giving away free pizza, okay? Free slices of mac and cheese on Election Day, November 8th from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. They're closed until 5. So go vote first. Get your pizza next. That's at Ian's Pizza in the 3 Madison locations. And once again, the final question for you this week to win my buddy's college football tickets for Saturday, November 5th, plus a $50 gift card to me and Julio. Answer this question and write it down. Post your answer on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram under the episode posts of this one and the last 2 episodes as well. I've explained it so many times. Just listen to an episode. As a head coach, how many conference championship teams has Kelly Sheffield coached? As a head coach, how many conference championship teams has Kelly Sheffield coached? Answer that question, answer all 3 correct, and you'll be eligible for the drawing for those football tickets and the gift card. All right. Thanks to my call once again, and thanks to you for listening to the John Cast podcast. Goodbye.